Kith and kin. "Isn't this a bit too easy?" asked Gideon. The others looked at him with confusion. "This solution just feels a bit facile." "It's exactly what the Marcher Assembly asked us to do," protested Reuben. "We should aid the beaters of the Morn in patrolling our borders," he said, almost quoting Nigel Hornbeam's statement of principle. "That's what this idea does." "Yes, but they were already beating the bounds," countered Gideon, unwilling to let it go. He tried again to explain what was bothering him. "I just expected it to be harder than this." "If we want to fight the Jotun directly, that's a decision our generals can take. They can send the armies here to help push the Jotun back. What we can do is highlight the beaters' virtue. If we help the bailiff talk to the Yeofolk, help them see how much hard work the beaters are doing, then they'll reward their prosperity. If that happens, there will be more beaters to beat the bounds, hopefully enough to make a difference." But Reuben cut in before Gideon could continue. "Wisdom is finding the right question," he intoned. "The Marchers didn't ask us to come here to do things for them. That's the last thing any proud nation wants. What they wanted us to do was help them improve the things they were already doing." "I guess," said Gideon, still not quite convinced. "But isn't there more we could do?" Reuben pondered for a moment and then smiled broadly. "That," he said emphatically, "is definitely the right question." Overview. At the winter solstice, the Highborn Assembly declared their peerless kinship with the Marchers. The desire was there to help strengthen their kin and do what they could to support their fellow nation. However, they were held back by a lack of direction from the Marchers and a nagging fear that the current situation in Bregasland might mean that instead of helping, they could just make things worse. The Marcher Assembly has allayed those fears by using a synod judgment to identify what would help most to their fellow priests. "We, the Marcher Assembly, accept the peerless kinship of Highguard and their Unconquered to aid the beaters of the Morn and the rest of the Marchers in patrolling our borders against the many incoming threats. We encourage the beaters to report any sightings of peril to the Bailiff of the Downs. Nigel Hornbeam, Marcher Assembly, 386 YE Spring Equinox, upheld 150-0. Nigel Hornbeam's judgment did not get a greater majority, but it was unanimous and left nobody in any doubt about what was needed. The borders of the Mornwald are under threat from the Yatun. What is needed now is for folk to roll up their sleeves and do something about it. Small things. The Marcher Assembly can pass a mandate encouraging beaters to hunt down the traitor Dalton Royce. The Highborn Assembly can pass a mandate encouraging the Unconquered to spoil the Yatun catches in Southmoor. The Yatun have brought a small exploratory force into the Mornwald. The longer they remain, the more land they will take. But what eased the path of the advancing armies are the stores of food, caches of weapons, and makeshift palisades that Jarl Harkon set up recently. Those supplies have created a weakness in the Morn's defences that the Yatun are now exploiting, but they didn't have to attack in Southmoor. The Yatun could have just taken advantage of the intelligence provided by Dalton Royce just as easily. After some discussion, there is an agreement that the best way to deal with the problem might be to split their forces. Dalton Royce used to beat the bounds, and his treachery sticks in the craw of many beaters. It would not take much for the Marcher Assembly to encourage the beaters of the Morn to hunt this traitor down and give him his just deserts. "Despise that which threatens what you watch over. Dalton Royce has betrayed the Marchers. We send named priest with 15 low to urge all vigilant beaters to thwart this malice before it strikes. Synod mandate, Marcher Assembly." If this mandate is enacted, then it will encourage beaters to hunt down Dalton Royce and to do what must be done to bring him to justice. Royce could be forced to surrender and brought back to Anvil for trial, or should the situation demand it, he could be executed on the field as a traitor to the Empire and the Marchers. Currently, he is somewhere in Yatun-occupied Southmoor, so this is a very dangerous mandate to enact. It would be prudent for the Marcher Assembly to pick a priest who is physically able to take the fight to the Yatun. The Highborn Unconquered know a thing or two about operating behind enemy lines. They are experts at creating caches of food and supplies to let them survive without support. They know those caches are vulnerable to disruption if you have the experience to know where to look for them. Eliminating the Yatun's supplies may not be as emotive as hunting down a traitor, but it is just as important. "Let us seek out the poison in our neighbours' fields. We send named priest with 15 Lao to urge all vigilant Unconquered to root out this threat before it is too late. Synod mandate, Highborn Assembly." If this mandate is enacted, Then it will encourage the unconquered to root out and spoil the caches of supplies the Yatoon have hidden in Southmoor. There are Yatoon armies in control of much of this region, so this is a very dangerous mandate to enact. Again, it would be prudent for the Highborn Assembly to pick a priest who is physically able to take the fight to the Yatoon. Hard work. If Bounders Hall is retaken, it will create a new military action for Marcher beaters to patrol the borders of Mornwald. The Empire could build Bounders Halls in other Marcher territories to extend the protection provided by the beaters. The Highborn make progress working with the Bailiff of the Downs to help them secure the Mornwald's borders, but they are forced to shelve their plans before they can put them into practice when Bounders Hall in Sarkham falls to the Yatoon advance. The poor timing halts what otherwise might have been one of the most promising ways to help secure the Mornwald. The Bailiff protects Marcher farms and settlements, coordinating with stewards and beaters to drive off outlaws and bandits. It is clear that they are an ideal choice to organise the beaters, and equally clear that the beaters have a crucial role to play in defence of the land. The beaters roam the Morn, watching for thieves, vagrants and other ne'er-do-wells, and watching the boundaries for signs of trespass. All they need is a little organisation. The problem is that in recent years some of the larger, more organised groups of beaters, those large enough to form a military unit, have abandoned the traditional defence of the land and gone off to fight alongside Imperial armies on campaign. How much of this is a consequence of the Guerdon is impossible to say, but prosperity demands that people can claim the just rewards of their labours. Is it unreasonable that beaters defending the bounds should expect to be paid just as those who leave the land to go on campaign are sometimes paid? The visiting Highborn priests think not. The problem is that there is little chance that the Imperial Military Council might agree to assign the Guerdon to those beaters who are beating the bounds, and currently they can't because the civil service have no records of who is doing it anyway. But the Bailiff of the Downs already has a role in organising the beaters, so they could keep the records. What is needed is a way to ensure that these hard-working marchers are reliably paid for their efforts. Nobody understands the importance of a hard day's work more than the marchers. Rather than rely on the military council for that, the Bailiff could make the case to the yeomen of the Mornwald, asking them to pay for the work to be done to defend their land. It's a simple plan. There's no reason it can't work, it just needs the Bailiff to be able to get their offices back. If Bounders Hall is retaken, it will create a new action for military units led by marchers with the beater archetype to beat the bounds. The Bailiff's office will organise contributions from grateful farmers in the territory to ensure there are sufficient funds to pay those doing the hard work of defending the borders, and their organised presence means that the marchers will have an additional line of defence should any force invade the territory. Then the beaters would be there to oppose it. While a few military units won't stop an army, any help, no matter how small, will help to slow it. And if enough beaters got behind the effort, in theory there's no reason why the same approach could not be used in Bregisland, Upwald and Mitwald. But it does require a bailiff with suitable officers who is responsible for the organisation and remuneration. If the Empire built a Bounders Hall in other Marcher territories, or expanded the modest offices of the Bailiff of the Grand Market with that in mind, and created a new imperial position of bailiff for those territories that didn't already have one, then it would extend the beater's remit to cover all the affected territories. If any territory were attacked, then the beaters would move to intercept it. Of course, the Yatoon attacked Bregisland and Mornwald this time. If that happened again, then any defence the beaters put up would be split equally, as they did what they could to delay each attack. And the civil service would have a list of every military unit that was beating the bounds. There would be nothing to stop the military council assigning the Guerdon to the activity as well, if they wished. Beating the bounds. This action is available to characters with the beater archetype who have a military unit personal resource. A standard military unit will receive payment of 100 rings from grateful Marcher landowners in the Morn. One that is enchanted or upgraded receives proportionately more. Military units that are beating the bounds will contribute to the defence of the territory against any attack from an invading force. Good apples. The Empire could build the third pie to secure the defences of the Mornwald. The Highborn priests suggest fortifying Fisher's Rock to protect Bregisland. The idea of building a fortification at Southmoor was first mooted more than 5 years ago in 381YE. At the time, the project may have been deemed too expensive. With strong keeps completed at Freemore and Greenswood, did the Morn really need a third fortification? The idea was popular with locals who nicknamed it the Third Pie, something that would turn the good, the line of defences across the Morn, into something great. Defences so strong they would intimidate all but the most determined attacker. The idea resurfaced in 385YE when the Eternal Zakalwe worked with marchers from the Rod and Shield to create plans to establish a series of towers and hidden sanctuaries around the borders of the Morn, supported by armories at the new fortress, Farstrider's Watch, and Landskeeper's Bulwark. Once complete, the new fortress and the two established ones would support beaters and local folk in scouring the territory for Yatoon incursions, ending them where possible and escalating the problem to someone who can deal with it where they can't. By working together, it would be impossible for the Yatoon to put a region anywhere in the Mormold under threat, while the three fortresses were in Imperial hands. The third pie looks like a good investment now that the Yatoon have done exactly as they threatened and invaded the Mormold. The third pie would require 50 wains of white granite, 30 wains of weirwood, and 240 crowns. Thanks to existing structures and investment in Sarkum, the work would take 9 months to complete, but it could not be started until the Yatoon were pushed out of the region. Building the third pie is a challenge. Fortifications are expensive, but it would be the most effective way to secure the Morn's borders. There are two obvious things the Highborn could do to help. They could use their influence in the Senate to support the commission of the new fortification. Once commissioned, the thing will need to be paid for. Highborn benefactors could help the Marchers find the white granite and weirwood needed. While the Highborn were asked to help the Marchers find a way to secure the borders of the Mornmold, the Yatoon invasion has made it impossible to ignore the fact that Bregersland is relatively unprotected. There is no Imperial fortification anywhere in the territory. The extensive marshlands make it possible to ask Serdogua for aid summoning defensive magic to ward the land, but many Highborn Magisters take a dim view of that as a solution. Relying on an Eternal to save you seems like a good way to define subsuming human destiny to an inhuman entity. Also, the so-called Brother of Wizards has demonstrated exactly how reliable he is in such matters with his recent threats. A better solution altogether would be to build a solid fortification that could anchor an effective defence of the territory. It is hard to survey the area at the moment, with Yatoon forces threatening to take the territory, but even a brief foray is enough to identify the ruined tower at Fisher's Rock could quickly be repaired. The tower is in a poor state of repair, but it never seems to fall down no matter how badly it's damaged. Something that has led the locals to claim it was built by the Sentinel. If a fortification were to be built around the tower, then the fortification would be unbreakable. This means that the damage to the fortification cannot reduce it to below 1,000 military strength. It can be captured, but it cannot be destroyed. The tower is haunted, and in fact the entire area is plagued with restless spirits of the dead. There are glowing lights that appear hovering over the marshes at night that lead people astray. Building a fortification here will inevitably stir up those ghosts, making the region haunted. Fortunately, the Highborn have more experience dealing with ghosts than anyone, and they can share that experience and learning with the local friars and monks to help them take advantage of the situation. If the fortification is built, the Senate could order the creation of a new imperial title, the Friar of the Dead Marshes. They would receive a small income of 5 Lao each season to help them deal with the restless spirits in the area. They would be expected to be responsible for the defence of the fort and any problems caused by the ghosts. Very occasionally, odd treasures are recovered from the marshes, old cups, coins, and sometimes more significant artefacts. Such treasures are usually considered the property of whoever finds them, but if someone were looking to dispose of something they found in the marshes, they would bring it to the Friar of the Dead Marshes first. The right question. The Highborn have 2 more seasons in which they can offer peerless kinship to a receptive nation of the Empire. This peerless kinship can be shown to any nation of the Empire. The Highborn Assembly can state what problem would be best addressed in the Statement of Principle raised to invoke peerless kinship. Thus far, the Highborn have been able to find ways to use their peerless kinship to help many of their fellow nations. Not everyone has welcomed the support, but in the majority of cases, the Highborn have been able to find ways to provide valuable assistance. By following the way, by encouraging the virtues, they have worked with priests and others from the nations of the Empire to find ways to benefit everyone. The impetus to help others in this way arose following the flush of victory in Zenith and Rakensgrab and was only expected to last a year, but many Highborn followers of the way are reluctant to stop here and argue that there is more work they can do, and they are eager to continue. Eli, the aging custodian of Walter's tomb, whose encyclical helped to create the peerless kinship, suggests that the process could be improved. He notes that Highborn efforts to help protect the Mornmold were delayed a season by the need to wait for guidance from the Marcher Assembly. If that delay hadn't happened, then Highborn and Marcher might have been able to start work sooner and done more to stop the Yatoon. So, rather than relying on the nation receiving the support to guide the assistance, Eli suggests that Highborn priests at Anvil could talk to their counterparts in the nation they wish to help. Once the Highborn priests discover what help they think would be most useful, they can include those details in a short statement of principle urging the nation to help and invoking their peerless kinship. The other assembly could still do a statement if they wanted to. If they did, then any Highborn who went to the nation to help would follow that guidance rather than anything provided to their own assembly. But this change would mean the Highborn wouldn't have to wait for that guidance to come direct from the other nation's assembly. As a result of the success of the movement for Highguard to show peerless kinship to their fellow nations, then the ability to do so has been extended by 2 more seasons. The Highborn Assembly can invoke Peerless Kinship this season and the next. In addition, this time they need not wait for the other nation's assembly to state what aid would be most useful. They can talk to members of that assembly and find out what is needed from them and state what problem would be best addressed in their statement of principle.